I'm your host, Praveen Ravisankar, and this is the Data Standard Audio Experience. We have a very exciting guest today. On our podcast, we have Steve Smith, who's currently the president of Equipment Effects. Today, we're speaking about the use of data in marketing and the equipment industry and the perspective of a business owner within the equipment industry. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here. An honor to talk to you guys and your audience. We'll see where it goes. Lots of directions we can go.
Definitely. And thank you so much for coming on to the show today. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Steve Smith. I'm the president owner of a company called Equipment FX, which when I get asked what that FX means, it means I do a lot of curious projects in technology and marketing. There is no same project. And I chose to leave the dealer OEM manufacturing world 14 years ago to chart a better course for the industry and learn along the way. And so that's what I do every day. I listen, learn, take notes, and try and apply new solutions to a big industry.
Sweet. I'm excited to hear about your past endeavors, and like what you see upcoming in the future within the industry. So a lot of times on this podcast, we have data scientists and data engineers, and we're really excited to have you as a business owner. And I kind of wanted your perspective on how data science really affects your business from a bigger standpoint, rather than just like feature selection or like the models that you use, but rather on how it affects your revenue and how it affects your overall business.
Big question. Data science, if you can properly define that term, it would make more sense maybe for my industry or for me. There's so many things that's scientific about data and its application in itself. So as it affects my business, currently, my businesses with clients always starts with, what is your expected outcome? What would you like to see look better? And what are the KPIs or the metrics we would put in? That's a form of data science. The marketing programs, web analytics, Google Analytics, there's lots of data science wrapped into that. I would say in today's technology world, I'm building solutions in Amazon Web Services, Microsoft's Azure Cloud, where you want to track what a user says and does, and could be through blockchain projects, chain of custody, who said what, who did what. What is that driving towards? What outcome are you trying to improve? The metrics that you install, sort of a before and after scenario. And with today's AI, I would use the COVID-19 as a powerful example of what we just accomplished with amazing technology. You have to begin with the end in mind and ask, what you're trying to measure. And today's cloud solutions allow you to do things super fast, super cheap, but you have to be kind of curious intuitively about what you're going to do with the data. Data's data, but then what do you do? How do you act on it? I think my industry breaks down because they don't even understand the term data science, what the applications are, and then more importantly, what they do with it. And I think that's just true for a lot of industries. Where do you start? It's a newer term, and it's easy to kind of get lost and go back to the way you're doing things, because people in my industry in general are a little behind, and you introduce new concepts. They're deficient in learning certain areas. They're threatened by it. And then they end up quashing the initiative because it might expose them in some way for not knowing, rather than reaching out to outsource partners that do this for a living. And then the data scientists in general have to learn how to improve their messaging about it's just, you work in complicated spaces. And if you don't make the complicated easy to understand in terms of a feature or a benefit or an outcome, then I think the mentality is just to maybe shut down and not explore the benefits. So that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of piggybacking off of that, when you do approach these clients and talk to them about like applications of integrating a data pipeline or machine learning within, or any sort of technology within their company, how do you go about breaking this barrier to them, and how do you go about like integrating it within, it doesn't have to be a specific example, but just a more general outlook of what are the general processes and questions that you ask them that you really want to help tackle and fix for them?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert like with machine learning and applying that through my client practice. I would say that you have to have a curious audience. They have to be really curious about how things can be managed better and faster for their clients. What is the benefit for their clients? For example, a field sales force of 100 people that sells different products, that needs access to different literature, manuals, and you want to do this through an app. open up the company app, you've created a custom library, you tap on the brochure you want to share to a customer. And even something simple like that is not happening. But you have to paint the possible and say, now, how much time would that save? You have to explore their current environment, your legacy system. How happy are you with it? Do you know how much better it could be with a cloud-based solution when things can be done faster and cheaper and improve the client experience? And so machine learning, AI, all of that applies to a customer experience, and customers that are happy spend more money with a customer. So you have to start out with a curious audience. They have to kind of know that what they could do or what they're doing is not very good relative to the possible. And then you just start digging in and asking for individual pain points. What process has bottlenecks? What process involves too many people? I have to physically look at a computer screen sometimes, looking at old AS400 green screen systems going, so why are you doing this? Well, because it's a legacy system, and to change wholesale, we're just not going to do that. It's too time consuming. It's too expensive, without picking up a small pilot project that might validate a proof of concept that improves the experience a bunch for a lot of people. And I have done projects like that. And then they say, wow, that was so much better. And then it leads into one thing. So you can't just walk into a client and say, hey, you need to overhaul your system, because they'll just tune you out. So it's trying to identify the pain points and picking off small projects that don't cost a lot and don't take a lot of maybe bandwidth on their end, because they're not maybe in that space. But my role is to be that liaison between the development company and a client to say, it's okay. It's going to be okay. Simple as that sounds, you know?
Yeah. So after you do implement these like technology solutions within these companies, a lot of consulting companies experience problems of like training individuals within the companies and things like that to help upkeep their system. Do you find any challenges where like people are like they have the domain knowledge but don't have the technology knowledge, or vice versa? And how do you go around like solving that problem and keeping the system up?
Well, every customer's completely different. Their staffing levels are different. Their aptitudes are completely different. I would say that during the course of a good consulting engagement, when you do proper discovery and figure out, do you have the capability to do this and support this? And the answer typically is no. And then, do you want me to do a Google search, or do you want to do a Google search for a technology development support company around these disciplines? And there's hundreds and thousands of amazing companies all over the world that provide these support services as a matter of practice. It's what they do, 24/7 uptime support. You know, you could start off with a Zendesk customer support system for $20 a month and build some automated responses into that system. Pretty robust. But for the more complicated projects, you have to get an agreement that you can't do this on your own. Most people can't do it on their own. They're not knowledgeable in the space. And if they lower their guard and realize their job is safe, that there are lots of very capable outsourced partners out there that are trying to get the business of these customers, for example, that I work with, you know. So they have to become comfortable with outsourcing. You know, of course, today, because of COVID-19, virtual working environments and solutions are much more accepted than they were a year and a half ago. You don't necessarily need to have your strategy meeting and have the developer right there. I'm a proponent of having a developer on staff, either full-time or as a consultant, because developers in general see things through a unique lens that most clients just don't do, you know. So you have to assess the project and you propose solutions. That's my job. And then if they buy into what I pitch, then I haven't had a project that's had any difficulty being supported.
That's great. And once you do implement these, how do you often like gauge the effectiveness of these campaigns, of these technology campaigns that you do end up implementing?
Sometimes it's hard for me to tell, because my business model for 14 years has been about doing assessments and limited term engagements. So the outcome over time, I'm typically not around to see the results. Although I'm still friends with lots of clients. I've had 165 plus engagements over the course of this time. Many are repeat customers, and I circle back and ask, are things going better? And the answer typically is yes, but what are the key indicators, item by item? The data that supports the word better, I often don't get to see that. But if things are not going well, they bring me back and say, hey, the project isn't on track or whatever. Can you help us out? But you know, that's I don't have the answer to say quantifiably how much better things are, other than in general, if they follow a plan, they're always better off than what they are now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I kind of want to touch on your experience as someone within the equipment industry and for like a pretty long time now. And I wanted you to touch on how you've seen technology change within like the last 10 years within the space and how like what you see it going to within the next 10 or 15 years.
Can't answer 10 to 15 years. A lot is going to change for sure. Every day there's something new. The compression of time because of COVID-19 was amazing, where we saw Zoom and Google Meet and everybody jumped in on Microsoft Teams. Collaboration tools are improving our lives every day. I've seen the adoption in this industry in the last 4 to 5 years of online tools and virtual working much more accepted. When I first started out 14 years ago, it was difficult to do a virtual client engagement. I almost always had to be there on site. And now I don't have to be that. It's accepted. So I think the overall outsource, sort of gig economy is it's not fully understood. I think traditional marketing roles and technology IT roles are not as evolved as they could be, but they will be when people still want to do things better and faster, and then realize the solutions that they use every day, whether it's an Uber app or Airbnb app or something that they're comfortable with, Facebook Marketplace, how to sell equipment more efficiently. They are in tune with some amazing standards. So when you're now communicating, here's an example, like if you want to live stream a sales event and you have the ESPN Sports app and you see how events are streaming in, there are simple technologies that allow you to host a sales event. And they're like, oh, okay, they can connect dots with newer technology today. And 15 years, I think the adoption will be much, much faster. And there's an emerging generation of mid-level management that is replacing in our industry the senior managers that are just loath to accept new technology because things are, quote, just fine the way they are. And the newer up and coming generation is more curious because they see how effective things are with their devices, their handheld devices, their desktops. They manage information through LinkedIn. They develop relationships through text messages and notifications, and the way the customer relationships are managed today versus 5 years ago is way better and way faster. And then 15 years from now, it's like forever. I don't know, it'll be better. The two-way communication through Twilio applications, for example, video chat, you could be anywhere in the world and feel like you're right next to them. That applies to every single role in every single company to some degree, if you think about it.
That makes a lot of sense. It's just interesting to like hear that because I feel like a lot of people, especially like nowadays after the COVID-19 pandemic, especially with so many different companies moving completely online, it's really nice to see that all the industries are starting to catch up and it's really becoming prevalent. Kind of moving on to the challenges that you've had implementing these solutions within these companies. I know you mentioned that having people be open to it is hard and you need a curious mind to like begin with. But once you do have that curious mind and you have someone who's willing to work with you, what's often the hardest part? Is it the technology that you need to like update with them, or is it the fact that like they don't really have any data collection procedures prior? Or what do you feel is like the most important part of, implementing a technology solution?
Writing a solid requirements document in the beginning and knowing that when you're designing a technology solution, you have to use a lot of visual aids. This is what it looks like now. This is what it's going to look like. And then you have to have a process that helps them visualize the end product, what it's going to look like, what the outcome is going to be, and then getting them the right to check, But I just think that the biggest challenge is painting the possible, and the way you paint the possible in my world. And I've learned from some amazing technology people because I'm not by nature a programmer. I work with them, developers. They can build anything you want these days, but it'll cost you a small fortune if you don't have a good requirements document, which requires the input from the entire team. I can generally get a project to 80 to 90% the way it's going to turn out, but getting their input to that they want to be part of the team. They have to acknowledge this is not a comfortable process. They have full-time jobs. And to go into a technology development project, you can take it from me, takes a lot of bandwidth to do it right? But if you present a requirements document and say, this is what the outcome is going to be, and this is what the cost is going to be, and you start small, I found the audience to be fairly willing to part with some money because the economics on their end, these are equipment manufacturing companies that have dealer networks, supporting dealer networks, not unlike a car dealership network that have billions and billions in sales. And when you start saying now, from my perspective, now I know you got a big budget, if we could improve this little project over here, what would the outcome be to you and your company? And if you can define that and dollarize it, time savings, dollar savings, labor savings, process savings, time savings, everything, they're pretty willing, but you have to build that case like an attorney does. You just can't say, hey, write a check and then we're going to do this. You have to be super meticulous with the requirements document. And then, in my case, I always bring developers on the final calls. I say, look, I'm not a developer, but I have a team and I trust them. Take it from them, not me. And then when they sort of see the whole package, they're surprisingly willing to get engaged. I think timing wise, coming out of COVID-19, everybody is sort of just now catching their breath, getting vaccinated. They're like last year and a half was incredibly difficult. And so they're not like ready to charge forward. I think that'll be different in 2022. So I'm planting lots of seeds to harvest in 2022 because I think people have seen the outcome of these digital solutions that have just been so much more efficient and their employees are happy and they've eliminated so much waste driving into the office. Salaried employees are home. Companies are paying less in terms of company reimbursement. And so the time is now to, I think, say, hey, there's a better way, and people are just going to be more receptive to it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I kind of want to touch back to your experience as someone in operations who switched to consulting. It's kind of like you've seen both sides of the table. And from someone as an operations perspective, how hard is it to implement something that, somebody else is suggesting within your company? Coming from that experience, how do you approach it differently?
Meaning is the question as if I were still in the operations side and somebody comes up with
operations.
Well, that's a cultural issue. I think any good company has to have an innovation culture. If you're not driving innovation at every level, saying your ideas are always welcome, then you're missing the opportunity because every day the rank and file, me, for example, that managed 220 people, a big operating statement, 125 technicians that were managing service and repair, they came to me almost every day with something and said, hey, if we could do this or we could do that, it would make our job easier. So whether it's a technician suggesting something or the IT manager suggesting something, as long as the idea is backed up by research and somewhat supported, and you have a culture of trying new things, then take the input from where it comes, and then ask the hard questions. As a former operations manager, what is the outcome going to be? What is the expected benefit? Is there going to be a cost to it? Let's do it. Sure, why not? That culture thing takes a lot of cultivating, and not every company has that. If you study product development companies or the companies that have gone from nothing to something, billion-dollar organizations, it's a culture of innovation, cross collaboration, ideas coming from where, and then not being afraid to see where it goes. Failure, is part of the process. So, yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And so we at the Data Standard are building a community of data enthusiasts and data thought leaders. Everyone is open for collaboration and to connect with each other. What do you think our community can do for you and your industry?
Everything. I think that not knowing who the audience is or what their roles are or how they're trying to sell themselves or their services, the overall message that I have for data companies, and I get messaged by all kinds of people every day on LinkedIn, just like you do. Hey, buy my data product, buy this, buy that. I would say, what is the value proposition to what you're doing? What is the problem you can solve? Do you have case studies and testimonials that would say, this is where I started with this data scientist or this project, and this is where I ended up? And you have to quantify this. And most of our data scientists and my technology partners, they're not the best marketing companies. They're focused on the task, not building a case on the internet, LinkedIn, social media on who you are, why you're better, and how to make you stand out from everybody else. Because everybody else, but there's thousands of people coming out of the woodwork saying, hey, I'm a data scientist, I can improve. And I always say, well, prove it. Like how? How do I know this? And I have what's called a strong reticular activating system where I'm really aware of my space. And when somebody comes to me with a unique proposition about how they manage their data or what the outcome might be using them and their services, I'll make time to talk to them and say, well, tell me because I have to figure out, is that something that I would present to a client? What would the client's potential pain be? Why would they listen to this data science? I end up being like a liaison between data science companies, right? Like I would sell differently than what you might do it. And I advise companies like them, this is your marketing message currently, and you need to improve it, but make what you're selling and servicing simple to understand in quantifiable terms. What are the savings? Why should we trust you? Because just from a pure marketing psychology standpoint, we get, I don't know what the statistic is today, we get like 5,000 marketing messages a day. And we turn it all off. And as good as I think all of your audience is, and they're probably good folks, the audience is incredibly indifferent, and they just don't pay attention. It's not, don't take it personally. It's just they don't pay attention because you don't have a headline and an offer and a low risk way to spend 30 minutes talking to you or download a white paper, because you haven't distinguished yourself from a sea of competition. So you have to be sharp with your message and your value proposition is my message to the community.
Sweet. Thank you so much for being on our show today. And we really, really appreciate your time. And I enjoyed this conversation, and I got to learn a lot about like the equipment industry that I never knew about. And I'm sure our listeners did as well. So where can our community find you and your company online?
www.equipmentfx.com.
Sweet.
And LinkedIn, Equipment FX, message me through there. Yeah. And happy to engage. I never know where conversations go, but they've often led to amazing things, amazing projects and relationships that, we're in this amazing discovery world, like what can we do? We have so many cool things we can do with what we all know. And it's trying to find that solution it's interesting. So it's been fun talking too.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for more information on the data standard, you can check out our website at www.datastandard.io. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to catch you next time.
Thank you so much.